The title of my talk is Understanding the Origin of Our Rare Relatives. So I think the first thing I want to do, and I'm going to spend some minutes of this, is just explain to you what is the meaning of my title. So I'm going to start backwards, and I'm going to start with relatives. So why I'm using this word relatives? Well, it's because plants are our relatives. So this is a fundamental philosophy that indigenous people have employed during decades and millennia to interact with ecosystems. They believe that plants are relatives, that they are like persons, and they deserve to be respected as is. And I want to show an example of an indigenous tribe in Peru, the Uro tribe. They live in the Titicaca Lake between Peru and Bolivia. And this is a high elevation lake, and they actually live on islands that are made of this plant that is called totora. This is a grass-like plant. And so they made this island out of this plant. They make their houses out of this plant. So they live on the plant. They live inside the plant in the sense that they build the houses. They use this plant to build the little boats. And also, you can eat this plant. So I ask yourself, think about what you're wearing today and the snacks that you just ate, the beautiful flowers that we have here, and what your house is made of. It's made of relatives. Here we have another picture. All right, so the idea that our plants are relatives have been rediscovered by Western science, and it has been named as the tree of life. So this idea is that not just plants, but all the organisms that live in our planet are related to us in one sense or another. And this idea is named the tree of life. So you have probably think about the tree of life. You probably have thought about the tree of life. And I always find really interesting what is your imagination of the tree of life. Because it's a concept that we can put in an image. And actually what I did here is I actually asked a artificial intelligence engine to draw a tree of life. And this is what it drew. And it's probably very similar to things that I have thought about. We can see all these different organisms. They're not fully formed, which is interesting. Some things look like plants, some things look like birds, some things look like insects. But the concept is there, and they are organic, and they are all associated with the tree of life. If we get more scientific, this is really how the tree of life look for evolutionary biologists like me. So the idea is that you can put all the organisms that are living in a single tree of life that connect all the organisms. Now, you can imagine that this is a really challenging task because we believe that there are 5 million species of organisms out there. We have barely scratched the surface and described 1.7 million of those. And we have sequenced probably just thousands of those. So this is a tree of life that was made by an evolutionary biologist using DNA sequences that have been published in the literature. And all these DNA sequences go to a bank of DNA that is called GenBank. And what you can see here is that all these different organisms that have been sequenced are in this simple tree of life. Now, something that is really cool about this tree of life is that when a tree of life is too big, then you have to make it a circle. So you can actually see all the organisms that are there. And what you can see that these biologists did also was that it added these concentric circles. These circles in this tree of life actually represent time. So basically, you can know the time of any ancestor in this tree of life. And what I found really cool about this image is that this looks actually like a cross-section of a trunk. It's still a tree, just in a different way, in which the rings represent time, just like in trees. So that's really cool. So we know that we are related to all the organisms. And the question is how deep this relationship goes. So we can do an exercise here and ask ourselves how related we are to a redwood, which is a tree that we probably see every single day, every time we go to work. So if we want to do this in this very dense tree of life, we have to find our position in the tree of life. So you can see here a couple of humans saying hi. So our branch is somewhere around here. And then you can see the redwood here. So the branch of the redwoods is here. So if we do the exercise in which we go back in time through these branches, and then we find where these two branches join, then we can see that our ancestor with the redwoods lived 2,000 million years ago, or 2 billion years ago. Okay, so I think I went through the last word of my title. And now I want to explain the part of rare. Why are rare plants or rare relatives really important for biodiversity? So all this diversity that we see in the tree of life is distributed in an interesting way in the world. So it's not really homogeneous. We know that there are places in the world that have accumulation of species that is higher than others. And like Eric mentioned, I work mostly in the California floristic province, so this is where we are right now, and then in the tropics, which is where I am from. What is interesting about these areas and the connection with rare species is that when you tally up the number of species and then you look at the composition of species that are there, you are going to find that 30 to 50% of the species that are found in these hotspots are rare plants or rare organisms. What that means is that the number of individuals for these species is not that high, so these species are reduced to a couple of populations, sometimes a single population. I have one student that is studying one species that is only found in Humboldt County, only in a single mountaintop. That's how rare a species can be. So as you can imagine, these species are really important for conservation because they are grouped in specific regions. So when biologists are trying to map imperiled biodiversity, diversity that is at risk, it's not surprising that we find places in California that are completely light up. This is because there are many species here with really small ranges that can disappear really easily. So what we do in my lab is we study rare species in the California floristic region and in the neotropics. I'm mostly going to talk about the California floristic region. So we can see here a map of the California floristic region. So this map, it's not political, it's a biological map. So everything that is colored is part of this region. You can see that it occupies a lot of California, but not all of it. And it touches into Oregon, Nevada, and Mexico in Baja California. This region is characterized by having close to 7,000 taxa, of which 42% are endemic. So 42% out of these plants are only found in this region, not outside of it. And California is a state that has a huge population, big cities, so only 25% of this California floristic province remains in relative pristine condition. Hence, this is why it is important to study these plants. So what we do in my lab can be divided in three main topics. The first one being biogeography. We're interested in mapping where these species are found. And for this task, it's very important to remember that we need to use biological records to achieve this. So I wanted to show here our amazing herbarium, which is an archive of plants, dried plants that are mounted in pieces of papers. And this collection has been digitized, and thanks to this effort, we have all this data that we can map today and produce these maps. The second part that we do is that we select focal rare species that we want to understand and study. And basically what we do is we go into the field, we collect these plants, we collect what we think are the relatives, and we sequence their DNA, and with that information, we build these little pieces of the tree of life to test hypotheses about speciation and their evolution. Finally, we also use this genetic information to understand the genetic variability. So there is not a lot of information in this topic, and what we're trying to do is we're trying to understand if the genetic variation that we see at the DNA level for these plants is good or bad, or what's going to happen with these plants with climate change and with evolution in the future. So we're just trying to build this information from zero. I want to mention that all this research has been done by a lot of my students. So all the mapping project has been carried out by more than 30 undergraduates that have been working with me in the lab. And the focal species that we're studying are being studied by my grad students in the department. So Kale is studying these rare violets that are found in Humboldt and Del Norte County. Cameron, who is in the back there, is studying wallflowers. Eli is studying sunbird Venus in Southern California, and Ashley is studying this legume that is only found in a single mountain top in Humboldt County. That's all I have for you tonight. Thank you.